When you say things are getting critical, are you talking about something to do with the vehicles that are in the rings of Saturn?
Yes, yeah.
Really?
Yeah. So I was behind closed doors for some time, and my clearance was way, way, way above top secret.
So can you tell us, are you able to tell us your title when you were working in this sort of division behind three doors?
No, I have probably 3 or 4 pages of titles.
Oh.
I don't know which one I'm going to land on. I can tell things, when I mean things, the conditions are getting critical. And I find that some scientists also think that. And so I think when I do publish, that group anyway will agree with me full-heartedly. People have got to be made to understand that those things are real.
Hi, I'm Carrie Cassidy from Project Camelot. We are here with Norm Bergram. He was with NACA, which was the early precursor of NASA.
Yes.
And he also worked for Ames Research. He has also worked for Lockheed Martin as well. And
no, it's just Lockheed. I left Lockheed before it turned Lockheed Martin.
Oh, wow. Okay, we're going back in time here. Okay, that's okay. That's all fine.
It's got to be accurate.
Yeah, no, you're
somebody
absolutely right.
Me on that
he was an employee of Lockheed?
Yes.
Okay. Before it was Lockheed Martin. And he has written a book called The Ringmakers of Saturn, which is why we're here. And let's see, it looks like you got another book here too, right?
That was a precursor, a very early one.
Okay, I'm going to show these to the camera so that we can make sure to get the... I have not read your book, Ringmakers of Saturn. I'm hoping to get a copy and read the book because I have heard it's fabulous. And I apologize for that. It was a little pricey for some reason.
Well, you better get it before it goes up farther.
Yeah, it has actually become something of a collector's item, but
Yeah, and when I publish the next time, it'll be like $1,000.
Oh my God, isn't that amazing?
Yeah. I've already sold one that where I certified my signature, I certified the book, $250.
Really?
Yeah.
All right, well, so
that gives you an idea.
We're in the presence of a semi-celebrity or a celebrity in the scientific community, I guess, in a certain sense.
I've been around quite a while in the scientific community, yeah.
Yes. Okay, so to kind of start off with, how old are you? Do you mind saying?
Well, I always say, would you like to guess?
No, I've heard you're around 80, but I don't know.
No, in 6 weeks I will be 91.
Oh my God. Wow.
And my specialist says, I think you can make 100.
Well, you are amazing because you look great, and I had no idea you were that old.
Yep. I work as hard now as I ever did.
Wow.
I don't have enough hours in the day for me.
Awesome.
And I'm making a change where I'm going to be able to have more time for me. And so it's a very significant thing. I won't be here the next time you come here.
Oh, you won't?
No, I'll be hidden somewhere else.
Oh, hidden in an underground base doing top secret?
No, it's just a very nice place, but it will not be easy to get to.
Wow.
Yeah. I've had my stuff stolen here.
Have you?
Yeah. So I'm going in for, you don't know where I am.
Incredible. Okay, well, that's very, very interesting. And right now we're in Los Altos Hills, and we are actually in your home. And thank you very much for having us here.
Well, you're welcome. My wife and I always enjoyed it. And I designed the whole thing.
It's a lovely area, and it's a lovely home.
Thank you very much.
And it's been very exciting trying to get here. I've actually, I wanted to interview you almost a year and a half, 2 years ago.
Yes.
And unfortunately at that time your wife had passed on.
Yeah.
And so you took some time, obviously. We're on our way to the Sacramento UFO conference. And so this was right on the way.
Yes.
And so it was very kind of you to let us come into your home.
Glad that you're here.
Thank you. So what I'd like to do is have you introduce yourself and your background, because obviously I've been getting a number of things wrong because...
Well, you got it right now, and the point I think you're interested in is how did I ever get interested in this?
Well, I've got lots of questions, but we could definitely start with that. But first, before you do that, what I want you to do is I want you to talk about your background. I want you to talk about sort of how you made your career progress, I guess you would call it, in the scientific community.
Okay. Well, it was at the time of the war, and I was with Douglas Aircraft. And I was on the drawing board designing turrets for a fighter airplane, and it had to be heated. Then a department manager showed up one day, and he asked my boss, "Is there anybody here that would like to come up north? I need somebody bad fast." That's essentially what it amounted to. And he said, "Yeah, check with Norm." And I'd heard so much great things about being up in the northern parts, more rural and down in the south. And so we said yes. And I went to Ames Laboratory. When I walked in the door, I was immediately an assistant project manager. When that happened, at that point, I was just a plain mechanical engineer. With some administrative things that Cornell was able to give me. But I was told, you never use your feelings here. You use data. And that has stuck with me all my life. Don't use your feelings. And you've got to nail something down. And all right, so the project that I got on then was the beginning of the determination of how you design an airplane with thermal ice prevention. What the equations are to govern how much heat you have. This required flying around in icing conditions, and we measured drop size, temperature, and how much water was in a cube of space.
You had to analyze the cold, the effect of cold on airplanes?
Well, there were two purposes. One was to be able to have some airplanes fly over the Himalayas safely. And that was the first application to airplanes. And then the second was to be able to build an icing wind tunnel. And that was done in Cleveland, Ohio.
What year was this?
Oh, golly.
Approximately.
1945 was when they started to build, I think. The flights were mandatory, and what we had was a sort of a dummy wing mounted amidship where we could adjust the heat on this model and determine exactly how much heat it took to get the ice that you saw there to go away.
Oh, I see.
There were some precarious flights.
What about flying in the Antarctic? Did you have to fly, or did they do any tests down there?
I think it's probably safer to fly in the Antarctic than it is where we flew.
Oh, really?
Yes, because it precludes formation of large drops. If you have large drops and they freeze, you're in bad trouble in an airplane.
Oh, so it's the medium cold that is a problem.
Yes, see, that's why we measure temperature, you see. One of the, I got to tell you this story, is that we flew from Laramie, Wyoming to Salt Lake City. And in between there's a range of mountains, but there's a cutout, so that you can go through there at low altitudes. This particular flight, I could tell from the instruments that I had, which were virtually the same as the pilots, that, hey, we're losing altitude. I've never seen an altimeter hand spin like this. It just went around like that.
Oh, wow.
You know. And the airspeed stayed up for a little while, and then it began to drop. Mind you, we were flying at like 150 indicated speed, and so it got down to 100, and uh-oh, here we go. And stall was like 92. We hit 93.
Wow.
And at that point, the pilots had poured on all the power to the engine they could get. The hand for the temperature, the piston rings were in the red, which you should never fly an airplane like that, but we did in order to get out of this downdraft.
I see.
And so that's the kind of thing we went through.
Wow. And why did that happen? Was it just because it had this down sort of area of between the mountains, or
we would have crashed had we been over to the right or to the left. We had an airline pilot, a United airline pilot, that knew all these routes, and that's precisely why he was chosen.
I see.
So that we would have as safe flight as possible. Yeah, we would have intercepted, no question about it.
Very, very interesting to go back in time this way. Let's fast forward a bit.
Okay.
Okay, and you went from studying this and from dealing with this and had exclusively, I'm assuming, to do with normal airplanes, right? Not rockets or going out of space.
Not at that point, right.
Not at that point. Okay, so at what point did you kind of move into the scientific area dealing with I don't know, did you go from there to Ames? Was it Ames or was it NACA?
Well, you see, I was at Ames all the time. I did the icing work.
Oh, you were.
And I did some stability and control work.
Okay.
Particularly as it related to the roll of airplanes and if they would go unstable in a roll condition. And I found conditions where they would. And so we had a situation with the test vehicle called the X-17, I believe it was, where they spun it up to try to keep it stable, but they were testing the warhead. And it was a flight where the head would go Mach 15. Okay, so I was able to back out the reason for it, and it had to be that the missile, the material in it was just off enough. It's sort of like a tire that was not properly balanced, and it would whip, and it just whipped. You know,
so you had to know all of that. Did you also have to know things about weather? Because eventually the rings of Saturn, I think maybe there's a link up here.
On our flights, we had a professional meteorologist, and the pilot, the meteorologist, and I always looked at the weather patterns. And during that time, I got acquainted with a number of other meteorologists, and they told me how they thought weather appeared just come out of nowhere. And I found that very fascinating. And anyway, the meteorologist and I wrote a joint report on the meteorology of icing.
Oh.
And so
you had that background as well. So, okay, that was at Ames, correct?
Yes. You see, we knew the icing program was going to come to a close, so a bunch of us proposed flights at Mach 15. And lo and behold, one fellow went down to the newly opened missile division in Van Nuys. And he wrote me a letter and said, "Norm, you won't believe this. They're doing just what you guys wanted to do." And here's an application, and they just fill it out. This is where you should be. And I did fill it out. My pay went up by a factor of 3, and at one point where we had this instability of the test for going Mach 15 down there, the head of the project was so impressed with how simple it was to fix this that I became one of his favorite guys.
I see. Okay, so at that point you're working a little more in, when you say the missile area, but was that was still, I mean, we're still talking about here on Earth, right?
Yes.
So how did you make that transition to looking at...
No problem. The equations are the same, airplane-wise, as the missile.
Okay.
And
as a rocket as well, right?
Yeah.
So did you, I mean, I'm really not sure, but did you work on the shuttles?
No.
No?
No, that was after.
That was later.
Yeah. That was.
So what was the politics that went from NACA to NASA? Because you must have been around right during the transition, right?
The idea of space was coming into the picture, and NACA was the National Advisory Committee for Aeronautics. So how do you fit it in? Well, we'll just invent another organization, and we'll call it NASA, National Aeronautics and Space Administration. You see.
I see.
So they get both of them in there.
But in a sense, when you were at NACA, because you wrote the Ring Makers of Saturn, so at some point you were already looking out to the stars, right? So if this organization was just called National Aeronautics, what was it, organization, NACA?
The National Advisory Committee for Aeronautics.
Advisor, okay. But they had to go into space before it became NASA. Didn't they deal with space?
The only one that went into space before it became NASA was the missile I worked on in Van Nuys.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Where did the missile go? Where was it supposed to go? Were you shooting it somewhere?
Well, let's see, we were firing it from Cape Canaveral and out over the ocean, and make sure that we didn't land on any land down in there anywhere.
Right.
But no, that was really the early years.
Okay, so you're working for NACA. When did you write the book?
I wrote it in 1981, I believe it was.
Had you left NACA when you wrote the book?
Yeah.
How long?
I don't know. It was,
Approximately. When did you leave NACA?
I guess it was like, it had to be Lockheed in this case. I think it was 1659, something like that.
Wow, so you wrote Ring Makers Saturn a couple years, like 20 years later.
The Voyager 2 had finished its flights, and I had Voyager 1 and Voyager 2 data, and that I inspected and studied for quite a while. And that's when I wrote the first book, and I was so surprised at what I found that it took me like the 4 years to get the book published, because I wasn't sure that what I had was really right. And so I looked in many articles and books to see, oh yeah, this sort of fits what they're talking about there. Okay, you're okay, so publish it. And so the book came out in 1985.
Okay, and that's the Ring Makers.
That's the Ring
But
Makers.
the other one, this one.
That's 1971. I had left Lockheed at that point. And so I was down at Santa Cruz on a vacation, and one day I spotted a real bright light in the distance, and at first I thought it was a a helicopter with the sun shining on the windshield. I was laying in the direction of the sun being from my back, and I was looking forward to look at this bright image. And finally I decided, hey, that windshield couldn't shimmer like that. And I ran and got my camera and shot some pictures. That was really a convincing time for me.
So was that a UFO? What we call a UFO?
You know, when it comes to calling things UFO, I part ways with people.
Okay. What would you call it?
It's an IFO, because I named it.
Okay.
Okay.
Well, did we build it?
Pardon?
Did we build it? Who built it? The craft?
I don't know who built it, but what I found out is these things inhabit Saturn. That's where I first discovered them, and they're proliferating. They're now Uranus and Jupiter. Wherever you see some rings now, why, that's one of these.
You see the craft.
Yeah, I call it a ring maker. Yeah.
Okay, you call it a ring maker.
Yeah, and I say it's electromagnetic because I could identify streamline patterns with respect to it that I knew were what we call potential lines, and that says it was electrical.
Interesting. Well, so the craft that you saw in Santa Cruz was the first sort of precursor of your kind of giving you a heads up. Is that right?
Yeah, and then for this book, I believe it was simply a picture taken out over these mountains. The object was over the ocean, but it was very bright, exceptionally bright. And
wow. So did you look at the sky with a telescope, or were you looking at the sky with just your naked eye?
Just naked eye.
Uh-huh. But you saw these objects.
Yeah.
And did you talk to anyone about that?
No.
You didn't?
No.
And you just decided to write your book?
Yeah, there were 26 copies of those. I don't know where the other 25 are.
You're kidding.
Yeah.
You wrote 26 copies of this book?
Yeah. That was how many were printed.
And there's, wow, this is really a collector's item then.
Yeah.
That's incredible.
If you find one, why, I'd like
wow.
to get it myself.
Okay, that's fascinating. This is interesting.
Yeah, that's where I got the idea that there were streamers from these objects. And, or I couldn't have drawn that, okay?
I see. What do you mean by streamers?
Well, you see those...
Yes. I mean, it actually looks like art. Yeah, but yeah.
I call those streamers.
Mm-hmm. I mean, do you know what that is?
I can tell you what in our physical terms they would call it. They would call that pinched plasma.
Oh.
And it means it's hot because it's plasma.
I see.
And because of certain speed and all this kind of stuff, it comes out pinched. You know, it's a certain condition. When I saw it, it was though on the top of the cylindrical object, the color of those streamers was what I call a nauseating chartreuse.
Really?
Yes. It was really the most nauseous chartreuse I have ever seen. The closest color that would match it is chlorine.
So you see these plasma sort of coming off the object, and this is with your naked eye?
Yeah.
Okay. So, I mean, you must have a very unique way of looking at craft, obviously.
I can't say that was completely the case. I did get my binoculars by this time.
Oh, okay.
And that was helpful.
Okay, and you filmed it as well, did you see?
Well, just stop, you know, still.
You have some stills. Are there stills in this book?
Well, of course, the Ringmakers of Saturn is all government shots, and they are stills, and these are stills. So.
But any of your own?
Only Tomorrow Technology, they are mine.
Oh, are they? Okay, interesting. So at this point, you're talking about having been in Santa Cruz and seeing a craft, inspiring to write the first book, I guess.
Yeah.
And that was about what you said, 1979 or
71.
when? 71.
Yeah.
And then what happened after you wrote the first book? What was the reception to that?
People take it, and I'd never get it back. I'd loan it to them. I'd never get it back. They just disappeared fast.
I see. What kind of people would take it? I mean, were they other scientists?
Yeah, by and large, yeah.
By and large.
Because, yeah.
Were they employees of NASA at that time? By then, NASA was formed, right?
Well, it's just people that I knew, my colleagues here and there.
Okay, so you went from Ames, NACA, and then to Lockheed, right?
Yes.
But at that point, when you went to Lockheed, was it turning into NASA at that point?
When I left, the answer is yes. When I left NACA, it was only months when
before it became NASA.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
And why did you leave NACA?
Well, I think it was because the fellow that sent me the app thought I should be down there. He said, "Hey, this is the kind of thing you've been doing there, and you should be here." And he was so right.
Oh, so the organization that sent you the application from Southern California was Lockheed?
The fellow that sent me the application formerly worked at Lockheed.
I see.
Yeah.
So was it Lockheed Skunk Works that you ended up? No?
I haven't been in there. I don't.
You haven't?
No.
You never met Ben Rich?
No, I have never met him. I have met some guys that have worked in there, and
Okay.
they've told me stories about that, but I've never met him.
So the division of Lockheed back then that you worked for, was it top secret or was it just in the public domain?
When I worked at Lockheed, I had documents that were indeed top secret.
Really? Wow.
Oh yeah. And then I went through the first generation of the Polaris underwater launch vehicle, and then I got tapped to go behind closed doors.
Oh, you did?
Yeah, and I was there for till I got claustrophobia.
You got claustrophobia?
Yeah. Yeah, I had to go through 3 doors to get to my desk. And
this is in Southern California?
no, it turned out to be up here. They moved.
Oh, Lockheed, because I know Lockheed was in Sunnyvale, right?
Yeah, but it started out down there.
I see.
And then, so I was behind closed doors for some time, and my clearance was way, way, way above top secret.
Okay. You know who Bob Dean is?
Yes.
Had you ever talked to him one-on-one?
I've talked with him, yes. He believes what I put here is yes, that is correct. Mm-hmm. And I agree with him.
Well, I just wondered because he had a pretty high above top secret clearance at one time.
Mine was above the President of the United States.
Oh, was it? Okay, and so were you working in an underground base up here at that time?
No, it was just a place that you would know how to get to.
Really? I wouldn't know how to get to?
It's, if you stumble around enough, you can find it, but
I see.
it wasn't all that big a deal. But
So were you? Was this the kind of thing where you signed the non-disclosure? You say you had to go through 3 doors to get to your.
Yeah, I had to sign my life away for 30 years.
Wow. Is it still in effect right now?
No.
No? So could you tell me anything?
No.
You can't?
Mm-mm.
Why? What would happen?
I'd prefer not to find out.
Oh, okay. All right, well, let me ask you, I mean, I know we're kind of jumping around here, but you're certainly piquing my curiosity about some of these things. So, was Lockheed over by Moffett Field during
Yes,
those days?
Yep.
Okay, that was a pretty fast yes.
Yep.
Okay. I was born at Moffett Field Hospital.
Oh, you were?
Yeah, I was.
There was, were you there at the time when the Macon went down?
The what?
The Macon?
The Macon?
The Zeppelin, the dirigible.
Oh, I don't know. I mean, I was very young.
Yeah, okay, all right.
So there was a dirigible that went down in Moffett Field?
You know, it's in that housing that is being stripped off of the top of it now. The hangar.
The hangar.
Has a lot of history.
Yeah. So did you ever see any UFOs out there?
Now, let's go back on this and get that straight.
I'm sorry, okay.
Yeah, because...
Whatever you call them.
You see, when you say unidentified flying object...
You're right. You're absolutely right.
You can't go anywhere with that.
Okay.
The only reason I see that people like UFOs is for that very reason, so I can keep in business all the time. Because it's unresolvable.
Okay.
Now, that's
so you've identified it.
But when you resolve something, you know...
Okay. But if you were in above top secret, let's say you might have seen some craft in those hangars. Is that right?
It was my first clue that there was something in space that was different. Okay. I was handed one day a set of data. The guy that gave it to me said, nobody else around here has ever been able to get anything out of these data, and if anybody can, you can. And so I went through it, and I found this one spot of data that really looked interesting. And I slugged through plotting it up. It was quite a difficult task to draw the picture of that. Mm-hmm. And when I got it, you could tell it was something strange.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
So let me ask you this. Can you tell me that you actually saw these things on the ground at all? Were they in location?
I didn't, at that time. I have seen one on the ground in Antarctica. You have? Not personally, but an image of one, which I wished I had cut out.
Right.
So no, these things can come in real low.
Yeah.
They're all sizes. Mm-hmm. It's the same deal as airplanes. You know, they're Cubs and all that kind of. You know.
Right, and so when you're talking about the craft in the rings of Saturn, you're talking about something huge, right?
Yes.
Much bigger than we could even conceive of. I understand. What is it? I don't know. What was it? 70,000 square feet.
I could, in looking down on the rings, I could see parallel lines crossing the ring, all the rings at once. Mm-hmm. That's about as long as you can get them.
That's incredible.
But I could tell that those lines demarked the outside of an object. Mm-hmm. And that's how I came up with the scale I present in there of different lengths of these things.
Okay, so at this time, though, you've written the first book, and you're working above top secret. You say you got claustrophobia, and at that point, you hadn't written Ringmakers of Saturn.
That's right.
Had you start to stumble on some of the information that eventually went into the book?
I didn't start anything with a book until after Voyager 1 and Voyager 2 flew.
Okay. But did you, back in those days, you already were sort of clued in that there were...
Exactly. That's why I started looking at anything I get a hold of. And this turned out to be just 35 millimeter slides that Caltech had released to the public distributor down there. And so I got just these small little slides. And
but you, at the time that you got that, you were not employed with anyone,
correct.
Is that right?
Yeah, I was on my own. Yeah. Yeah, I knew eventually I had to do that.
So are you sort of saying, when you say you got claustrophobia, I don't know what that means. Do you mean that you became sort of tired of working at in this above top secret area?
Yeah, no, not tired, and it was very exciting. I got to see everything that went on all over the world.
Wow.
Nothing much has changed.
Yeah?
I don't know how...
Or were you threatened? Were you, what did you have friends who were leaving the employee of Lockheed at that time? I mean, was there some incident that happened that made you want to leave?
No, it wasn't that. Let's just say that you're confined to one room, day after day, year after year, same walls, so forth. That's claustrophobia.
I see.
But I knew that, hey, there's something going on out there, and see if you can't find it. And
so in other words, on a certain level, you wanted to go beyond the confines of what you were studying.
Yes, sure. And I made myself a policy. It's got to be all government images. No shots by me or any other person.
Okay.
Because what happens is that if you say, oh, let's say I took the picture. What film did you use? What shutter did you use? Da 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 da. That is never questioned when you have a government picture.
Okay, but have you heard that NASA alters their footage coming from the moon, etc.?
I know some of the things they do with it, yeah.
Okay, so even their footage is not always dependable, right? Although I guess it's dependable to begin with. It's just that they start altering it later.
I have been told by a very reliable source. He asked me what camera did I get that image from on the moon. I said Hasselblad, and he said, "That's right." He says, "I thought we darkened that enough that you wouldn't find it."
Oh yes, so you were finding things that they thought they covered up.
Yeah.
Incredible.
Yeah, yeah.
That must have been a lot of fun.
And this guy says, "Well, I suppose you want me to go out and tell everybody about that." I said, "No, I don't want to embarrass you. That doesn't make any difference to me. Whatever you want to do is fine with me. I'm just saying I found what you saw."
Okay, what about the Mars footage?
The people that look at that, I wonder sometimes how in the world they can say what they do.
Because you can find a lot in that footage.
Oh, yes. No question.
So have you got your own photographs that you got from the government that you then were able to, sort of look at and keep in sort of pristine condition?
I'll tell you, at this juncture, I don't know what I have. I finally went to put it in a vault that the people claimed nobody can get in here, including the government. But unfortunately, somehow, somebody did.
Oh, really?
Yeah. And what they do, like I have some of it on a laptop, some of it's just on discs and so forth, they garble it. They run it through something and they garble it.
So it's no longer...
And sometimes there's just nothing on there. And I know that there should be something, and there's nothing. So I don't know how much of the early stuff I can put together. What I do know is I can put together it any time. Okay, so
Just
I
because
don't
of
need that old stuff, you can tell people.
Really?
You know, I don't need it.
Because you know, you're familiar with the landscapes, you know where things are.
I know where, yeah, I'm familiar with the landscape. I know pretty much what's going on.
Okay, so, well, that's very tantalizing. So at this point, you learned quite a bit. You were very respected, I imagine, when you left, even above top secret, right? You left employee of Lockheed in good terms or not good terms?
Yeah, I was respected.
Mm-hmm.
There was a time when, on the Polaris vehicle,
Mm-hmm.
that when the missile was fired off, it didn't light up and came back down and hit the submarine. And I said it was the umbilical plug. And the head of the project said, asked me, what do you think it is, Norm? And I said, it's the umbilical. That's the most reliable thing there is on the bird, Norm. It can't be that. And a Navy guy came in later, and I said, it's the umbilical plug. But Frank is not going to believe it unless we pull that thing up. And we got the whole Navy out there. I don't see why you can't pull it up. And if we don't pull it up, the Soviets are going to do it.
Mm-hmm.
He said, Norm, focus synchronize your watch with mine. 3 minutes, you're going to have a call from Frank. 3 minutes, I have a call from Frank. He says, Norm, you're going to be real excited. They're going to pull up the bird. And it was the umbilical. And after that, as Norm said, it was a certain thing. Don't argue with him.
That's great.
You know, it was that kind of thing.
Yeah. Absolutely. So can you tell us, are you able to tell us your title when you were working in this sort of division behind three doors?
No, I have probably 3 or 4 pages of titles. I don't know which one I'm going to land on. And I think what's going to happen is that I'm just going to have to find the images that I can get that either aren't affected by anything, or I get some new ones of some sort that will sort of govern how this whole thing goes together. I am very aware of Sagan's principle. When you make big claims, you have to have big data, you know, and that's the big thing about it. That amassing enough data that goes, oh, it's got to be true. There's so much of it, you know, and it takes a long time to put together that kind of story.
Right, but you've been working on this whole idea for a long time.
It's up here, all right.
Yes.
But I haven't been able to get anything much down on paper. I spent 2 years with my wife before she died, and 2 years getting things straightened out afterwards. So there's 4 years in there I've lost.
I see.
And I can tell things, when I mean things, the conditions are getting critical. And I find that some scientists also think that. And so I think when I do publish, that group anyway will agree with me full-heartedly.
On your conclusions. When you say things are getting critical, are you talking about something to do with the vehicles that are in the rings of Saturn?
Yes, yeah.
Really?
Yeah. You see, it's sort of simple. That's a lot of energy.
Right.
And
Okay. And this is the ring, right? This part, this is the ring?
that ends up being the ring.
Yeah.
It's
And they're-
hot plasma.
Oh, really? Okay, so, and what your theory is they're manufacturing it, is that correct?
It comes, that's the exhaust from this thing.
From the craft?
Yes.
Is it because, are they stationary or are they moving, the craft?
They're probably moving.
So do you think, when you say things are getting critical, are you
Okay,
saying?
now, just take that picture and say that's the exhaust. It's like you have an airplane with an exhaust.
Mhm.
It's in your atmosphere, and it can load a lot of energy, you know? And, but this is, Saturn, like John Lear says, you know, Saturn is the focal point, and I can't agree with him more.
Okay, but John Lear talks about Saturn actually being portal into another dimension.
Well, you know, he's theorizing.
Yeah, so you don't necessarily go there.
I don't go that way.
Uh-huh.
I either say, this is the way it is, or I can attack it.
Okay, but you're saying things are getting critical because I'm really curious. Are you saying that those craft are coming here? Is that why it's critical?
No, I'm saying, in effect, if they do, and there's a good probability that that is possible,
Uh-huh.
then, hey, you got to get with it. You can't wait around.
Mm-hmm.
Okay? But you see, no one really in this country accepts the concept that at Saturn, those things are there.
Right.
As you can't do it at Saturn, well, you know, you just can't hack it. People have got to be made to understand that those things are real.
Right.
Now, there are two images that we were taken by the Hubble telescope of Saturn this last year, 2012,
Okay.
that shows objects under the rings and one just right to the edge. Like I said, they were.
Mm-hmm.
Okay?
Is that Cassini? Is that, did the photographs come from Cassini?
The last ones, no, the ones I told you about that shows those,
Right.
those
No.
are Hubble's.
Those are from Hubble.
Yeah.
But am I wrong? They closed down Hubble, right?
Well, yeah.
Or that's the official
But-
story, right?
Wherever they closed it down is 2012 before they show you the picture.
It's 2012 before they show you the picture. What do you mean
Yeah,
by that?
and I was able to tell that before 1985.
Yes. So you were way ahead of
I'm
everyone.
way ahead.
Yeah.
And that is too long to tolerate that kind of science.
Mm-hmm.
It's just too long. Now, I have 3 reports, I guess, on the environment, let's say, in UNESCO, but they're yay thick, all three of them weigh 18 pounds, or about 6 pounds each. And they have to vote on what they think goes on. That is not science.
They have to
That's
vote.
politics.
Okay, yeah,
That's not
you're right.
science.
That's absolutely
But
right.
they sell it to you as though it's science. It is not science. Okay? And that is the hump that you could help get us over.
Okay.
Hey, those things are real.
Okay, but if there are craft, there are beings.
Okay, people have asked me about, I call them vehicles, okay?
Right.
Now, I did not call them objects. That was too neuter for me.
Okay.
I had a Stanford professor said you ought to call them objects, Norm. No. They have all of the qualities of a vehicle. They can move. You know, they're just like a missile or anything like that. So that much we can say about them, for sure.
Okay.
So I'm calling it a vehicle.
Okay.
Okay, somebody comes along and says, well, now where would you manufacture one that's 2.5 Earth lengths long? And that's a hard question to answer. However, if you think of it in terms of its living entity, it's just another kind of thing that we've got in our universe. And it can grow and grow and grow and grow.
Okay,
So it can be an EMV and it can itself have life.
Uh-huh. So are you not positing the idea that those vehicles contain, beings who are, maybe like us?
Yeah, I only go along with government images. And if you want to know about people kind of thing, there is the ship that picked up the Voyager capsule at Alameda Naval Shipyard, and they have a picture there of I think it's the Apollo flight that Buzz and Neil were on. But anyway, there is one image there that shows black people getting off.
So people with dark skin getting off.
Not dark, black.
Black skin.
Really black. Yeah.
Were they tall?
Yes.
Very tall?
Yeah.
How tall? Do you know?
Well, they got out the doorway. I don't know how high that is, but
Well, what?
it's safe. 7 feet would be probably a conservative estimate.
Have you heard about Clark McClellan's statement about that?
No.
Oh, you haven't?
No.
Have you ever been in touch with him?
No.
No?
I have tried to stay independent and not be affected by others' opinions.
Mm-hmm.
I would rather have what I present clash with somebody else and see who wins.
Okay.
And settle it that way,
rather
than make a shouting match over it.
Sure.
I learned at Ames that the louder you shouted, the more probable it was that you would get your way. And I don't want to go through that routine.
Okay. Well, good for you. So you're saying it's what did you say, $5 million? Billion? $4 billion.
Yeah.
So
that's an estimate of how valuable he thinks all of this is.
I see.
But he doesn't get any support.
Right.
See?
Interesting. So you think that Obama would like to find out more?
Oh, yes.
He would like to keep NASA operating?
Yeah, he would like to.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay, and you know that because...
Well, I know that he has a friend there at the head of NASA,
Oh,
and he would like to have him look good and so forth, so he would like to see some things go on under his watch, but it's not happening.
do you know who's preventing it?
I think it's the overall economic picture that's preventing